Hello and welcome to this, the second round of the second set of pool play here at the World Magic Cup, and this is the point in the competition where top 8 spots begin to get locked up. Both Israel and France have found themselves in the position where they have the potential here, if with a win in this round, to make it into the top 8. Still got a second chance if it works out that something goes horribly wrong for them this round, but they would love to be able to be comfortable and finish up their day now knowing that they're going to hit the very final elimination stages on Sunday. We've got Zuckerman on Boros Agro on the left of our screen, up against Depras on the right. Golgari mid-range versus Boros Agro. Matej Zadelkai, is there a favourite for you here?
I mean, I would probably have to go with the pro player on our right. Far more experience. Look at his stats: 76 career pro points, and already with the pro tour top 8 under his belt, and a GP win. Where when I saw him play, I was very impressed. And Zuckerman, he's 15 years old, but this guy's crushing it. I watched him last round. He actually played against Emmanuel Gershenson on his very favored Jeskai control deck, and Zuckerman just gave him no chance in game 3 and left him in dust and led Israel to this deciding match for the top 8.
Now, I kind of love it when you see the White Weenie decks getting there, lots of one-drops going wide early on. That's exactly what we see coming from Zuckerman here. He's not going to struggle too much to get up to City's Blessing with that kind of a play, but Ravenous Chupacabra does mean that Depras is able to make sure that the board doesn't get too wide, at least early doors. And if you're Golgari mid-range, I would assume that you're looking to just get through the early game without getting overwhelmed, and at that point you get to leverage your most powerful cards.
Yeah, exactly, and Depras is doing a great job of this, trading his early Llanowar Elf with the Sky Marcher Aspirant, then having another Llanowar Elf and that Ravenous Chupacabra to go along with that. Plus he has double Vraska's Contempt and a Find Finality in his hand, so he can definitely sweep the board if he wants to. And then Zuckerman probably kind of realized that that is what might be going on here. Use a Conclave Tribunal on a Llanowar Elf. That's not going to be that great. Depras blocks the Adanto Vanguard, waits for the 4 life being paid by Zuckerman, and then gets Vraska's Contempt with the Chupacabra still on the battlefield. We're really far from that City's Blessing if we're on the Israeli side of the board.
Now, in the long run for Zuckerman, one interesting line available to him once he hits the mana is turn after turn getting Heroic Reinforcements going. Heroic Reinforcements definitely can represent a huge amount of damage from these Boros aggro decks. One of the key reasons to have red in the deck whatsoever. But it looks like, based on the way that Depras has been able to play this in the early turns, that it's going to be a bit difficult for the Israeli team to be able to actually get a board wide enough that he's going to be able to get things going, and that's even if he does hit his land drops.
Yeah, and we know that Depras with the sweeper in his hand, he can just slowly wait out. Now even drew a Wilder Walker, which is a decent blocker on his turn. And I'll be honest, the long game I will still favor the French on our right, because as soon as Depras now draws any land, any explore creature, it's just going to make sure that he's going to hit the end game with some success. But Zuckerman at least draws another Conclave Tribunal, gets rid of the Wildgrowth Walker here.
I mean, thank goodness for Convoke, because the land's really not coming for Zuckerman here in this game 1 against the French pro, and just having to rely on using the Convoke ability, those 1-drops, essentially additional lands at this point. But that, of course, does come at the cost of he's not really able to get into the red zone with any great alacrity.
Yeah, he did keep a 1-lander. I saw his opening hand there. So, I mean, 1-lander with 3 1-drops is something you definitely can keep with the Boros aggro list. There's a Merfolk Branchwalker revealing a Seeker Squire. Would have been even better with the Wildgrowth Walker in play.
Yeah, I mean, the Wildgrowth Walker just kind of juices up all of these Explore draws, but having so many Explore creatures just means that this Golgari mid-range deck is fearfully consistent. It's able to draw into its lands without having to naturally draw them on its regular draw step. It's able to get past the cards that maybe aren't quite so good in any given matchup, and then once you throw Wildgrowth Walker into the mix, that's a lot of life, and that's a big beefy body on the battlefield.
Yeah, Legion's Landing was a decent job. It actually adds 2 permanents for City's Blessing purposes. Plus, it might actually give Zuckerman the 3rd land that he needs to at least cast one of the Benalish Marshals in his hand. Plus, of course, ramping his way up to the 4 that we talked about with the Heroic Reinforcements.
Yeah, 4 very much the magic number for Zuckerman. I'd imagine that his curve doesn't go a whole lot higher than that. So he does now have Adanto the First Fort. We'll be able to churn out Vampire tokens potentially in future turns, though That in itself would require one more land.
The Pra trades off for the Aspirin with the Chupacabra and blocks one of the Hunted Witnesses. The Hunted Witness is actually a nice addition to this sort of deck, especially against the sweepers, because at least it will leave you with some board to work with. There's the 6th land for the Pra, and now we're going to see the heavy hitters. I assume we're going to see a Carnage Tyrant on the battlefield very shortly, and then a finality on the following turn. We've seen this play a lot over these 2 days.
Yeah, Carnage Tyrant just has all of the abilities, all of the numbers that you need. At 6, it's relatively straightforward to simply cast, and then it's a gigantic monster that's very difficult to interact with. Benalish Marshal, though, will actually help quite a bit here, because at least it means that the likelihood of Zuckerman being able to line up some sort of a multiple block to kill it has increased a fair bit here.
Yeah, and also an attack into the Carnage Tyrant with those guys. I'm surprised to see this.
I mean, I suppose that getting an attack in here means that potentially future turns with heroic reinforcements,
True.
he doesn't have quite so much work to do. And Benalish Marshal means each of these creatures attacking for a sizable chunk. The lifelink on there could prove relevant also.
Yeah, he's going to block here the Hunted Witness. I would be very surprised if the Pra doesn't fire off the finality on his next turn. He probably recognizes the potential threat of heroic reinforcements himself, and doesn't want Zuckerman to get a wide of a board. To be fair, the Pra also has a Vraska's Contempt that he could sit on, so it might just depend on what else he draws.
Yeah, a nice position for Depra to be in, of course. Having all of these options, he can either elect to fire off a piece of mass removal here, or just kind of carry on with the board as it currently stands. It's not as if he's far behind on this board, certainly. Yep. But though I guess there is the little concern of, my opponent has missed land drops, and they've got a whole bunch of cards in hand. If they're starting to hit a pocket of land now, there could be all sorts of bother on its way, and it's hard to know exactly what that might represent.
Yeah, he also drew another finality, so he could theoretically go for a bunch of sweeps. He could also just start returning creatures from his graveyard. He does have the Chupacabra, which is great against the Benalish Marshal here. Yeah,
Chupacabra, one of those creatures that you really don't mind if it dies in this Golgari mid-range deck, because there are so many different ways of getting it back between Find and Memorial to Folly. But here we see Finality doing its side of the deal. -4/-4 to all creatures, apart from that Carnage Tyrant, which, while it does get -4/-4, also gets a couple of +1/+1 counters.
Yeah, Depra attacking before first, so that he gets the maximum damage in, and then sweeping his board afterwards. He wasn't scared of double block. Zuckerman didn't have enough power on the board to trade with the Carnage Tyrant, and even if he had, Depra also has the Vraska's Contempt that we mentioned before.
History of Benalia here, looking, if anything, a little lackluster, but just down to the fact that there's so much going on Depra's side of things. Only 3 mana for Zuckerman, meaning that he's kind of at the mercy of the Frenchman here, and with a Ravenous Chupacabra to clear a path, that's enough to have Zuckerman picking up his cards. Team France doing all right. They've also picked up a game win on the bottom table between Timothy Chameau and Amit Etgar. So in nice shape for Team France right now. Shahar Shenhar in the middle of the Israeli team. He'll be looking to spur on his teammates by finding a win in Game 1, which has ultimately eluded those sat on either side of him.
Yeah, we're going to see Arno Hawkmiller against Shahar Shenhar here, and I saw a little bit of Hawkmiller playing last round. His Jeskai control list is spicy. If you look at the graveyard, there's Fight with Fire, Revitalize. There's some really nice ones in his list. Another Revitalize here, drawing a card, gaining some life, and I'm really impressed by the way Arno is actually playing this. Really solid, very crisp. He knows exactly what he's doing.
And one of the cool things, of course, about playing Jeskai Control in this Team Unified Constructed is there's a bit of knowledge that things might mix up a little bit in terms of deck building anyway because of how this format goes. But there are so many powerful cards in Jeskai that trying to predict what you're actually up against can be a little bit tricky. Teferi, yeah, that one's pretty much a given. But a lot of the other cards, there's a bit of flexibility there.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Shahar Shenhar does have Niv Mizzet Perun alongside 3 1-mana spells that he would be able to cast at least some of immediately after the Big Dragon Legend. How much of a problem is that going to be for this Golgari? Sorry, for this Jeskai control list?
Yeah, I mean, with Teferi already on the board, it might be an issue here, but I just think that Shahar is trying to set up for like a big turn because he has double dive down to protect the Niv Mizzet. Maybe he's trying to set up his turn so that he has enough mana to play all the cards and maybe leverage the Niv Mizzet a little bit better. Okay, never mind. He's just going to go for it right here. And yeah, I mean, he has now 3 mana up. I imagine, yeah, he couldn't have really tapped any better. So now he has double dive down up, or maybe dive down plus spell pierce, but the spell pierce is quite poor on this board here.
Well, that's a pretty clean answer to a Niv Mizzet Parun. You're not trying to kill it with damage, simply trying to bounce it, and both players are going to get to draw a card off this one.
It's not that great here. You don't really want to bounce Niv Mizzet because that's going to give your opponent more cards to work with here. A chart, of course, picked up by Shenhar from the trigger. Yeah. Also, the Teferi is getting hit by those pings from the legendary dragon.
So there is the option of dive down here in order to keep the legend around, but it looks like Shahar deciding that he doesn't really need to worry too much about that.
Yeah, Teferi still, though, giving a lot of card advantage to Arnaud here, who's probably looking for his own Niv Mizzet, which would be quite strong on with the cards he has in his hand. I also saw an expansion explosion in his hand. He should deal a lot of damage with the lands he has on the board.
Yeah, Expansion Explosion, a nice win condition. Obviously, getting a little bit crazy if you happen to have a Niv Mizzet in play yourself, but even if you don't, there's a lot of damage in them Nahils, and that's something that Shahar Shenhar will have to look out for. As for the second time round, he plays Niv Mizzet Parun, hoping that this time round the legendary Dragon Wizard will be able to hang around for just a little bit longer.
And we'll see how Hawkmiller responds here. He has a bunch of cards in his hand. I think I see a Fight with Fire as well. He might be just going for the Explosion for 6 and then Fight with Fire. But no, he's not pulling the trigger just yet.
Now, if you're playing Expansion Explosion against one of these Izzet Drake's list, how much mana do you leave left open as you cast it?
That's the big question. I don't think Spell Pierce is a standard card, but I expect the French to know about this. Now we're getting a big turn. So the Niv is resolved. Hawkmiller went for a minus activation on the Teferi to tuck away the Niv Mizzet. Well, he might. Yeah, all that stuff is resolving, looks like. And then we'll see a kicked Fight with Fire. And copied with Expansion Explosion.
So this is just 20 damage straight up.
Straight up 20, yeah. So I think Hawkmiller, that was his plan all along, trying to bait Shahar Shenhar into tapping out as much as possible. Shahar still gets to draw a bunch of cards here from the triggers, but I don't think he's going to have a negate or something like that. And even if he did, I think Hawkmiller also has the Ionize in his hand as well to protect his combo. Against only the 1 blue mana of the former world champion. That's it. What an end to this game. Wow.
Yeah, and as it turns out, a little bit of a cleaner way of winning, even than trying to cast a gigantic explosion and then winning off the card advantage available from that. So nice play there from the Frenchman Arnaud Hawkmiller, and that means that going into these game twos, Israel very much on the back foot here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the French have been crushing it, and they've been also a team that we haven't really talked that much about. They've been quietly chipping away at determining winning their rounds, and I think they're quite underrated, actually.
All right, so we're going to get a chance to see a little bit more from one of these other tables here. Now we're going to get a chance to see a little bit more Golgari. This is Amit Etgar up against Timothy Jamot. Selesnya tokens for the Frenchman and Golgari mid-range for our Israeli player here, Amit.
Let's see if Selesnya tokens can keep up with Golgari mid-range on the draw. That it can be sometimes an issue, and now it made even worse by the Llanowar elves on Edgar's side.
Flower, Flourish, a nice neat way of fixing mana in the early turns, and then of course later on it represents a big pump spell that can sort of push things over the top. One of the reasons the Selesnya deck is so good is that it does have a lot of ways of pumping its team, and this is almost a free one to include in there without any real cost in terms of deck building.
Absolutely, and it also is mana fixing, because with either white or green you can find the other color if you don't have it in the early turn, so it's really nice. Speaking of nice, Jade Light Ranger getting pumped up twice there. Llanowar elves hitting the bin, but another Jade Light Ranger on top. Edgar might just keep it. It looks like he has enough lands to keep going. Yeah, you already played land there, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, you had a good turn, but you can't have a turn quite that good. Come now. But a baffling end might be the answer that we see on the other side of things from the Frenchman. Looks like there's a couple of copies of that one sat lurking in his hand there, potentially getting rid of key threats coming early doors from the Golgari player.
Yeah, the matchup here it's very interesting to play the Golgari mid-range against Celestian tokens because there's so many haymakers on both sides that are like very important. So March of the Multitudes and the Immortal Sun are very important for the Celestian token deck. On the other side, the Golgari mid-range deck have finality to clear the board, and that's why we saw in the last round even duress coming in from the Golgari mid-range deck to take these powerful cards out of the hands of the Celestian decks.
Okay, so the first Baffling End, that one has worked out absolutely fine. Another Jade Light Ranger coming along here, finding, well, I mean, if you're looking for a long game, you have Carnage Tyrant and a Memorial to Folly to get back the Carnage Tyrant if need be. That essentially all that Golgari mid-range is going to need in the later stages of this game. And right now, if you're Jamo, that's a pretty tough one to see happen all in the one turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's Carnage Tyrant is a huge threat. And Jamo just has a slow hand. I mean, I see double Trostani, March of the Multitudes, and Baffling End I mentioned. At least he did draw into a History of Benalia they can deploy here. It might make his life that much easier once he gets to deploy his creatures and gets to play his marches.
Yeah, I mean, Selesnya tokens without the tokens is really not much of a deck at all. And so, yeah, getting creatures on the board just greases the wheels for everything. March of the Multitudes gets so much better when you already have a whole bunch of creatures in play. And that's exactly the sort of thing that Edgar wants to make sure does not happen. Ravenous Chupacabra coming down, just taking out a Knight token. That's the kind of play that you wouldn't necessarily see everyone make all the time. But I think it makes sense here in this matchup.
Yeah, it does, and it just makes sure that Jamo is not getting to develop the way he would like to, so that once the Carnage Tyrant comes down, it can really dominate the battlefield. There's another History of Benalia, though, and I think Jamo will also have a Temple Garden. If Jamo draws his 5th land, playing Trostani on such a board is going to be actually quite problematic for Edgar.
Yeah, because the turn that Trostani comes down, not only will there be the pump effect of Trostani herself, but also the History of Benalia will have popped off, meaning that swing will be for an awful lot of damage. And this Ravenous Chupacabra, it's attacking in, basically, it's getting in almost free damage because it's not likely to be a block on the other side of things from Jamo. And given that there's Memorial to Folly, really not too big of a concern to have the creature with the powerful Enter the Battlefield trigger in the graveyard.
Yeah, now Jamo draw actually a Flower Flourish, so it's kind of like the downside when you need the land to be untapped and not having to spend mana to find your lands. It's a little better, but at least he will be able to deploy the Trostani sooner or later. Might just fire off a Baffling End here. And Tim, I have to say, I have to steal that joke because you used it earlier today. It really is a ravenous cheeky Cabra.
Yeah, I refer to any cheeky attack as being a small creature that ought to die by being blocked, still attacking in and just getting in a little bit of value damage. And it's a really problematic thing. It sort of gradually builds up over the course of the game that at some point you do need to trade off with these silly little creatures, and here is the flower making sure that next turn Trostani Discordant will be able to come down, generating a couple of soldiers, giving all of these creatures +1/+1. That last line doesn't tend to come up too often in Constructed, but every now and again an entrancing melody getting foiled by that, I would guess.
Yeah, and so now I think Jamo will pass without playing the Baffling, and I assume so at least, and try to go for a March of the Multitudes for 4, because if he gets to untaps with those lifelinking soldiers, he'll get to slam the Trostani down, really make his board quite sizable. The History of Benalia will also pop off. So if the Carnage Tyrant attacks here, at least Jamo will be able to swing back for significant damage.
So a brief pause here. Often it works out that against Selesnya tokens, you hit a point in the game where the board is very, very busy indeed, shall we say. It becomes a little bit tricky to fully figure out how easily or more difficultly it might be to attack. Here, Carnage Tyrant, yes, it probably can swing in. It seems unlikely that with what's currently on the board, there's going to be any blocks that are too terribly scary. If you get all 3 of those knights, you don't mind too much. The bit that makes it complicated is the likes of things like March of the Multitudes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's usually March of the Multitudes is fairly telegraphed. You can figure out very easily when your opponent can play it. We've already seen the Italians also kind of adding into this whole untapped mana framework by adding Settle the Wreckage to their deck in a lot of the sideboard games to check this a little bit. And look at that. There's no attacks with the Carnage Tyrant. preferring to leave that back, and I think that's quite smart because all those knights will grow up to be 5 power once the History of Benalia goes off and the Trostani gets played. So a cheeky attack here with those with the Chupacabra and the Jade Light. And I think it looks like Jamo is trying to figure out if it's good value for him to go for March here and maybe try to trade with some of the creatures. He might expect something like a finality here, but I would expect maybe Edgar to play it earlier if he actually did have it.
Well, you know, that little attack, it wasn't so little. It's taken Gemol down to 9 life there as he declines to block, instead looking to make the most of the History of Benalia completing itself this very next turn. Wild Growth Walker coming down. But here is Trostani Discordant, 2 soldier tokens being generated.
March 1st, so with
oh, sorry, my bad, yes.
March 1st for 4 tokens. And I'm surprised Edgar did not play a second Carnage Tyrant because it's a great blocker for those 5 power knights. And yeah, we'll see what he's up to here.
Yeah, plenty of mana left open by the Israeli player here, so definitely suggesting that there could be something more coming on.
Yeah, he has the Carnage Tyrant in his hand. There could be some big attacks here from Jamo. I mean, one of the knights will get blocked by the Carnage Tyrant, but those even those soldiers attacking and the other knights, that can be just a lot of damage.
It's a lot of damage. It's a fair amount of life gain as well for the French player, just so that he's able to potentially make a race difficult for Golgari mid-range.
One of the things that I think Edgar might be representing is something like Vraska's Contempt, or maybe even an Assassin's Trophy, maybe just to make Jamo scared of playing the Trostani and attacking with everything, because killing that Trostani would mean that Edgar would take far less damage and would be able to pick up 3 creatures on Jamo's side of the board. So we'll see if the French go for an all-out attack here, or if they're going to play it a little bit more conservatively. Nope. Attack with everything. I like it. It's the magic arena button, all attack.
I am a fan of it, it must be said. Just hit spacebar, it'll do the exact same thing, and when they're all sent into the red zone, all of a sudden, all of those decisions, they're left to your opponent to make in terms of figuring out what you might have and so on and so forth. Obviously here, Jamo had to tap out pre-combat to play his Trostani Discordant, pump his entire team. But these attacks coming in for quite a bit here. Don't forget that History of Benalia has also completed this turn, so all of the knights, they've got +3/+2 in total, so 5/4 knights coming in here. That prompting a fair amount of blocking. So this is 11 damage getting through unblocked, and a further 8 life being gained by Jamo, going back up to 17. So the life total's really switching around quite a bit here as this combat resolves itself.
Yeah, so one of the knights should be dead, if I'm not mistaken. It was blocked by the Carnage Tyrant, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the tokens bounced off. Yeah, there's the knight going away. Right, 7-17, a great board for Jamo as well. Can the French go into match point?
Yeah, I mean, remember that this matchup, the winner will be in our final 8. They will be playing on Sunday. The losing team, they are not completely done for. They'll have one more chance to be able to make it through if they are able to win the subsequent round. But obviously, you'd much rather lock it up sooner rather than later if you can help it. And here we see all of the soldier tokens now unaffected by Summoning Sickness. Trostani Discordant brought 2 of them along with her at the point that she came into play last turn.
Yeah, now they're doing the math because they have that Baffling End. They drew an Adanto Vanguard as well. So I think they might have figured out that math that they're going to take away the Wild Growth Walker and probably swing with everything here, even the Trostani. There's the handshake in. France so close to the top 8 here.
Yeah, France potentially getting the perfect win here against Israel. They have not dropped a game thus far in this matchup, and this means that now between Jean-Emmanuel Deprat and Arnaud Hochmuller, they just need to find one game win between them, and France will be in the top 8 of this World Magic Cup.
Yeah, and I can't wait to watch this match because what Arnaud is doing, it's amazing. I really like his jet ski controllers, and he has some spicy ones. It's really hard for even a player of Shahar's caliber to play against all these various cards that the French player brought to the table. So we'll see how this pans out. Shahar Shenhar is on the play and does have a turn to search for Skanta. That's a great start for this game for him.
Yeah, Search for Azcanta, not necessarily a given in every Is It Drake's list, but it's a very, very powerful card, and the Is It Drake's list will get lots of cards into the graveyard pretty easily anyway, meaning that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin the sort of place that's actually relatively easy to find. You don't have to search very hard. It was, it's right there the whole time.
Yeah, and a turn 3 Enigma Drake is a great way to start putting on the pressure. But Arno does have a fight with fire. I actually really like this inclusion because it does deal with your Wild Growth Walkers, with your Crackling Drake, Enigma Drakes, and even Niv Mizzet.
Yeah, it turns out that there are some cards that are difficult for red decks to deal with straightforward burn because their toughness just a little too high. Fight with Fire naturally dealing a full 5, and that enough to deal with almost every creature in the format that you're able to target. And so the fact that it can also do double duty when kicked, going straight to the head, means that it easily makes the cut here.
Yeah, I think it's a very important part of the puzzle, is that you can really finish off a game here.
Crackling Drake coming along, and Niv Mizzet Perun potentially not far off for Shahar Shenhar, looking to even up the scores here on the middle table. It's possible, of course, that Zuckerman falling to Deprat might be enough to mean that it's all for naught.
Look at this. I mean, Hawkmiller just played a blink of an eye on a Crackling Drake. You don't want to give your opponent card advantage, but it looks like Hawkmiller just doesn't care at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that sort of sometimes with these Jeskai lists, it can be a little fiddly to figure out where they sit on the control tempo sort of spectrum. When you have Niv Mizzet Perun in your deck, for example, sometimes just slamming down that dragon in the sort of early to mid game is good enough, and you don't necessarily need to be looking at planning out this turn where you have 15 lands in play and a clever expansion explosion finish. Sometimes you can just get people, and Hokmuller here, he's got Lyra Dawnbringer in hand, so it may be that he's just thinking, let's get a body on the board and see whether or not we can close this game out a little faster than Shenhar might be ready for.
Yeah, Shenhar a little bit unlucky here. He with the search for a Scanta, he milled away. He was looking for another land, and now he went for an opt to dig for the land, didn't find it, so now he actually has to resort to a charter course to find something. He discards a treasure map, did find the land, but now he's not going to be able to deploy anything on the board, maybe except for a treasure map, and Hawkmiller can punish that, not just with Lyra, potentially with that Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Yeah, Teferi, one of the key reasons to have blue and white in your deck at the same time. Just such a powerful Planeswalker once it gets on the battlefield. And right now, shield's very much down for Shahar Shenhar, so he will not be able to stop Teferi hitting the battlefield if that is what Hawkmiller decides that he wants to achieve here.
We'll see what he decides to play. I think he's going to go for the Teferi first. Yep, getting those cards. And hopefully he has a Revitalize in his hand, so there's even more value to him untapping his land and going through his deck a little bit deeper. He can play the Lyra a bit later. There's no need to pressure him. And of course, it's Shahar who's trying to build up his mana in a way that he would be able to play Niv Mizzet, but he'll have to wait a few more turns, because playing Niv Mizzet by tapping out completely against a Teferi on the board is not really where you want to be.
Yeah, and there are some cards that can deal more cleanly with Niv Mizzet than others, and Teferi's minus ability definitely qualifies as being a relatively neat way of doing things. But yeah, dive down in hand means that eventually Niv Mizzet could find itself in great shape. Revitalize at end of turn there after Crackling Drake from Shenhar, and gradually Hawkmiller, he's getting a few things going here. I like what he's doing. I actually really like Revitalize somewhere in the 75 for Jeskai.
Yeah.
It's a card that essentially cycles, but it does gain you just a little bit of extra value, and I guess it is a spell to cast if you do happen to have a Niv Mizzet to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's have a little brief look at what's going on in Hawkmiller's hand. He's been gradually drawing cards over the last few turns, and he's got a nice little package of some control options for creatures on battlefield. He's got some counter magic. He's got card drawing in Expansion Explosion, and then Lyra Dawnbringer. I like that one too.
Yeah, I mean lots and lots of options. Even an untapped land in that island that just popped into the hand. I can't say what Arno is going to do, because from my position it's just impossible. He probably has practiced his deck a lot. I haven't seen many of these Jeskai control versions being played. Revitalize was popular early in the format before the Pro Tour, fell out of favor as mono red aggro also fell out of favor, and looks like just a Sacred Foundry and a pass. Very interesting.
Yeah, just sort of play it cool, keep it simple, and wait to see what your opponent's got going on. The one problem with sitting around waiting for your counter magic to do its thing is Niv Mizzet herself, Niv Mizzet rather, uncountable.
Yes, that's very important to know, because we do know Ockmiller does have an Ionize in his hand. What I think he's going to try to do is to protect his Teferi with that Seal Away and Ionize, but Shahar probably has a lot of the pieces that he would like to have. He has that Niv Mizzet and a Dive Down. Soon he might be able to flip also the Search for a Scanter for more mana and more card selection. So there's definitely a clock on this. And there he is, Niv Mizzet Perun. Shahar not messing around, he's going for it right away.
Yeah, and with one Dive Down in hand, that ought to be good enough to be able to get things going. Though, worth noting that in this matchup where there are lots of instant speedways are potentially dealing with the Dragon Legend, it's not an absolute sure thing that Dive Down will be good enough if you can kind of respond to the Dive Down with a different way of removing the Dragon.
Yeah, so there's the Seal Away on the Crackling Drake. Looks like that will resolve, okay. So that's going to mean the Teferi can continue on his way, doing his thing.
Yeah, Planeswalkers keeping loyalty around when Niv Mizzet decides to target them down, that can be fairly tough. Even just the regular card drawn each turn enough to offset regular loyalty gains, but then once you start throwing around any other spells on top, I would imagine that Teferi is going to get killed off before we see many points of damage sent at Hookmiller here.
Yeah, so he goes for the minus on... oh, okay, tucks him away.
Very patient play here.
Very patient here. I don't think I would be able to do so myself, but it kind of punishes Shahar here, because he's just saying, okay, I can treasure map away a card down, I can search for a Scanter card down, I can get to the Niv Mizzet right away. But now, he was leaving his one mana up for Dive Down, but he doesn't have a way to deal with Is it Viceroy? That just means that Hawkmiller can plus in. He has already 4. Yeah, he has 4 instants or sorceries in his graveyard. So just Hawkmiller having so many potential answers for the Niv Mizzet.
Yeah, Ral Is It Viceroy, yet another powerful Planeswalker for the Jeskai control lists. I mean, anytime that you find yourself playing against multiple Planeswalkers, it presents something of a problem. And I don't really feel like Is It Drakes is particularly well pieced together to be able to deal with Planeswalkers in play, apart from with its powerful flying creatures. And right now, I struggle to see a powerful flying creature hanging around for long enough to be able to attack in.
Yeah, but Shahar is still fine. He still has Niv Mizzet Dive Down available to him. That means that, Planeswalkers are fairly slow in that regard. They're sorcery level activated abilities. So if Shahar goes for Niv Mizzet and protects his Niv Mizzet from one of the Planeswalker's minus abilities, the other one won't be able to do anything to it either. So, and he also has that treasure available to him, taps out, goes for Niv Mizzet. And now again, the ball is in Arno Hawkmiller's court.
Yeah, 3 mana up in the form of those 3 treasure tokens, so it's not as if he can't protect his dragon if he needs to.
Yeah, and he actually goes for a Charter Course right away. He wants to snipe down at least the Teferi, I would think.
So this may meet a response of some kind from Hookmiller, assuming he has the mana to do so. 3 copies of Expansion Explosion in hand, 1 Ionize, 1 Lyra Dawnbringer, and that island up top there.
Yeah, so he's going to try to copy the Charter Course and get some new cards for his hand. It's going to be a very complicated stack here. All right, so our judges are ready.
Yeah, additional cards here to represent card draw on the stack.
So that's first the trigger off of the Expansion Explosion. Shahar gets to draw and deal 1 damage here. Yep. Picks off 1 counter off of the Teferi. Now the expansion will resolve. It will copy the Charter Course. Of course, that doesn't yield any more triggers. There's an answer to the Niv Mizzet. I see a 5 with fire. But first discard of the Charter Course. And now there's a draw from off of the Charter Course. Trigger, of course, still only. Again, 1 damage. Goes over to Ferry.
Yeah, this is exactly what Niv Mizzet likes to do.
Right.
Cast a few extra card drawing spells, generally wreak havoc on your opponent's side of the battlefield. Yes, Ral is its Viceroy is in play for now. He's already down to 5 loyalty though, and I can't imagine that if there's any dilly-dallying from Hoke-Miller that he can expect his Planeswalkers to hang around here.
Is that an Ixalan's Binding? No. It is. It is. Oh my god, that's huge. Ixalan's Binding is a card that's really good against Niv Mizzet, and especially because Shahar drew another one. If he can resolve it here, and he has Ionize to counter the dive down, Shahar might be able to draw some extra cards here, but he won't be able to deploy any more of his Niv Mizzet. It's going to be a huge turn for the French.
Yeah, Ixalan's Binding, of course, also perfect against Niv Mizzet because it's not an instant or sorcery. It's not going to trigger the dragon's powerful ability, meaning that this one, a straightforward 1-for-1 piece of removal here.
Still not over, of course. Shahar has plenty of other ways to win with all his Drakes and Search for a Scanter will also flip, giving a lot of cards, but this Ixalan's Binding is absolutely backbreaking here. So
we do see this last treasure get cracked because, well, do it. There. Oh, rewind. Shahar Shenhar just carefully figuring out what he wants to do here. He recognizes that right now Team Israel in all sorts of bother here. Yeah. Plays a dive down.
It's going to trigger the Niv Mizzet again, drawing him a card and then dealing 1 damage. It's going to get ionized. Shahar's tapped out, so that Niv Mizzet will be gone for good.
So the ionize meaning a draw for Niv Mizzet and a point of damage to Ral. Dive down's getting countered, but you know, apparently you can't win them all. There's still the Niv Mizzet ability here, meaning drawing another card and able to get a passing shot on that Ral is it Viceroy, but now no need to worry about the dragon on for Hoke-Miller here. He has dealt with that threat. He's got a big Planeswalker on the battlefield and he very much has the advantage in this game as it currently stands.
Yeah, and Shahar really drew a lot of cards now over the last 2 turns thanks to the Niv Mizzet. So even if that is dealt with possibly permanently with the Ixalan's Binding, there's not many ways to deal with enchantments in this Drake deck. Sometimes they run Blink of an Eye to bounce it for a turn, something similar. But I think I see in his hand Murmuring Mistake and a Crackling Drake as well. Those are both really powerful. And he also drew, I think, a Ral is it Viceroy of his own.
Dueling Viceroys, they're not necessarily ones that can off each other, but in terms of sort of long-term impact on the game, get to improve the quality of each player's hand quite a bit, and if one of those ultimates does go off, then wow, fireworks.
Yeah, this is truly an epic, not just game, a match even, and we saw only glimpses of game 1 here. There's Crackling Drake first.
That'll draw a card for Shenhar, and additionally, already a pretty sizable creature. It looks like there's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spells in the graveyard thus far, and I'm sure that that's likely to go up as this game continues. Not too much graveyard hate on either side here.
Yeah, at least with Ral is it Viceroy on the board, Hoke-Miller will be able to start picking off the creatures of Shenhar with the Ral minus and whatever else he has in his hand.
All right, just keeping this steady stream of fire coming along. I mean, in principle, we could see something very similar to what came along in game 1, being a fight with fire kicked and then copied with expansion explosion. That seemed like a relatively clean way of closing out the game good and proper. Now, obviously, now Shenhar has seen that. There's the potential for some counter magic somewhere in the mix there, but in principle, Hoke-Miller can just kind of build his mana base up and potentially just ignore the fact that there are creatures on the other side of the battlefield and go straight to the dome.
It's a very interesting spot for both players. I mean, Hoke-Miller does have his combo in hand. He has Fight with Fire, he has Expansion Explosion, but he's short on mana so far. He only has 8 mana. He needs 12 to do the full combo.
Just think of the days when we used to be casting Urza's Rage, eh? What a world we live in now.
Those were the times. That's actually around the time I started playing competitively, and I cast my fair share of Urza's Rages back in the day.
There used to be a fantastic Antoine Roel deck that he had 2 Urza's Rages and 1 Nether Spirit as his win conditions. It was a thing of beauty.
Brilliant.
So Murmuring Mystic getting shot down there by Ral, who goes down to just one loyalty in order to do so. And now we have a follow-up in the form of, there she is, Lyra Dawnbringer, the big legendary angel who has a set of stats that means that she can very much tussle with the various drakes that might be looking to come along and pressure either Hoke-Miller or indeed Ral's life total.
Yeah, but now we're going to see a sweet battle where finally Shahar Shenhar will be able to deploy some Spell Pierce, because Ionize on the Ral Vis Advisor is going to be met with Spell Pierce. I don't think Hoke-Miller is surprised, but this is just going to clear the way, kill the Lyra, and then kill the Ral with the Crackling Drake. And the board has cleaned up a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the kind of turn that Shenhar needed there, dealing with a lot of what was going on the other side of things. I mean, there's still the issue that there's a lot of action in hand for Hoke-Miller, but in the short to medium term, Shahar Shenhar just needed to find a way of stabilizing.
It looks like Hoke-Miller is tapping 8, leaving up 2 mana, and he might think about playing Explosion. Yep, on the...
That's on Ral, isn't it?
Yeah, any target, so that's on Ral. That's going to get Spell Pierced. He left up the 2 mana to do so. And that's going to get Spell Pierced again. But now Shahar is almost out of cards there, but has the Ral surviving this turn, has a big Crackling Drake, has the Ascanta, the Sunken Ruin, and if he finds some more counter magic, he should be really well placed to take this game, sort of to force game 3.
Very tense times for Israel here. The two-time world champion Shahar Shenhar, very much the leader of this Israeli team, but right now it's only Zuckerman, the 15-year-old player on Boros Agro, who's been able to pick up a game here. He's currently at 1-1 with Jean-Emmanuel Deprat. Meanwhile, on the other 2 tables, Timothée Jamot has already won his match 2-0, and if Hoke-Miller can win this game against Shahar Shenhar, then that other match, it simply won't matter. We will already have a French team in our top 8, and everything else from there on in, well, it's all just sort of playing for a bit of fun, I suppose.
Yeah. It is going to go down to the wire here. Ral found with a Scan Sunken Ruin, not a negate or something similar that Shahar Shenhar would really like here. And I'm really curious to see what will Hoke-Miller do on his turn. He has quite a few options at his disposal. Look at that Disdainful Stroke Down. That's the kind of card I was talking about. A counterspell that can really deal with those big threats.
Yeah, Disdainful Stroke, one of a whole variety of bits of counter magic that they're very specific in what they hit, but they're efficient in terms of mana cost, assuming that they've got a good target. I like the move from R&D to gradually work towards having these counter spells that offer you a little challenge during deck building.
Yeah. There's okay, Lava Coil was drawn for Hoke-Miller this turn. He's targeting the Crackling Drake. Exile, so that might give Hoke-Miller enough time to really play his Expansion Explosion. He doesn't really want to play it on the Ral here because he knows Shahar has a backup one. He might wait until Shenhar maybe activates the Scanta, the Sunken Ruin, maybe play something. Just 2 mountains here off the Ral here, not delivering the goods that he needs.
Crackling Drake, though, will bring another card with it. And at this point, all of these Drakes that are coming along, pretty chunky in terms of their size. 17 points of life for Hoke-Miller, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if it worked out that 2 swings were enough to close out this game here for the red-blue player on the left of our screen, that being 2-time world champion Shahar Shenhar.
If there's one thing that Hoke-Miller could sensibly do if he draws 2 lands in a row, is to kick Fight with Fire and copy with Expansion. Actually, that plays around Disdainful Stroke, because even if you kick the Fight with Fire, it still only costs 3.
Yeah, crucial element in terms of the way that Expansion works. You can't copy... I mean, if you had a Cruel Ultimatum, for example, that's always got a converted mana cost 7. You can't copy that one, whereas these smaller spells, yeah, even if they have got a bit of a kicker cost lying around on the back end, they are copyable with Expansion.
Yeah, and remember we talked about the potential sudden death rules that can kick in when players run out of time, and these are getting very low on time. If they want to play game 3, it might be really going down to sudden death.
And what a way to decide the top 8 of our World Magic Cup here in Barcelona, Spain.
There's an untapped team. Does Hoke-Miller have enough? I thought he was only... Yeah, okay, let's see. That's 5.
That's 9 mana.
It's 9, so he does have enough.
We've seen this play before from Hoegmiller. The last time round, it was a very straightforward 20 to the head. This time round, though, what do we have on the other side of things?
He did draw the land needed. I miscounted mana that one of those duels was hiding beneath another one. So now, I mean, Shenhar has a disdainful stroke, but it's not really useful here. He might just have to dig with his search for a Scanta and try to find another Spell Pierce, but he has already played 3 of them. I don't think he's running 4 Spell Pierces, but he might be. He's going to dig.
No harm in having a little try here. He just double checks Discovery Dispersal.
No. Opt. Okay. One more
and
try.
there's the handshake.
Wow.
Team France. They are in our top 8, defeating Israel. Israel, they still have a chance to make it through. There's still another round, and with 1 loss in the pool stages, they have the potential to make it through in the next round rather than this one. But big high fives there from a very happy French team. They have made it through these brutal group stages. The group stages, 2 wins and you're through each pool. 2 losses though and you are out of the tournament entirely. And Israel on the brink now. They need to win this next round if they're going to stay in and indeed advance to Sunday's play. But congratulations to France. Fantastic play from them. We'll get a chance to see a little bit more about what's going on around our tournament and potentially some deciding games for you very soon. But first, these messages.
right, welcome back to the news desk. Rich sitting alongside Tim and Matej. We are down to the last round, which means that coming up we're going to have 4 more win and in matches and 4 lose and out matches at the same time. So no more hiding places, no more losses to give. But 4 teams are through to the top 8. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But waiting patiently out on the floor is someone who is rather looking forward to Sunday.
All right, I'm here with Arno Hochmüller. You just won that match. It was pretty crazy. You know, you feels like if you sink 10 mana into a spell, that your opponent should be able to disdainful stroke it, but that's not it. And that was kind of your read on that situation, right?
Exactly. Like he already played 3 spell pierce, so I mean, I was behind on boss, so I had to try for a land for the win, and he had the stroke, so we just played to our outs, and it worked out. So that was great.
Yeah, it gets to 20. Now, this puts Team France into the top 8, gives Team France an opportunity to become the only team to win 2 World Magic Cups. You were watching the last time France won the World Magic Cup very closely, weren't you?
Yeah, 5 years ago, so we put a stream for the French viewers, and everybody was following it. We are commentating the French games, following their results, and they were calling me after they made top 8 and after the win, and I got to interview them for the French viewers. So that was a pretty great experience, and we try to put something like that this year by giving French people the results in their live, right after our run. So I think people are very supportive this year, and everybody loves the World Magic Cup.
All right, well, Ralph Levy, I know you're somewhere in South Africa right now, but, you know, if he wins, you're going to have to call him and interview him live this time, okay? Sending it back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks very much, BDM, and Arno Hochmüller there successfully through. So why don't we look at our scoreboards here, the pools here on the afternoon of the World Magic Cup Day 2. There is Pool A. Hong Kong are through to the top 8. They advance. Hungary are eliminated. Finland against Slovakia, Matej. I know you're rooting for Finland in that one.
Nope. I do like Finland, though, and I wouldn't be surprised if they made the top 8.
No, indeed not. But Ivan Flock and Milan Isnansky and Richard Hornansky will be looking to change that narrative for sure. That's Pool A. Let's look at Pool B. So this featured Israel. Well, they're still alive and they face Austria. But as we know, Tim, France have advanced.
Indeed, they have. Congratulations to them, of course. Still potentially live to win multiple times, though. Worth noting that a number of our teams that have advanced have won the World Magic Cup before.
That's certainly true, yeah. So France, past winner 2013. Let's take a look at Pool C and see what's going on here. The Philippines are out. Uruguay and Australia will face each other to see who makes it to the top 8. But Japan, the reigning champions, have made it to Sunday, and they're only 3 matches away from retaining the title.
Historic stuff.
Amazing stuff. Truly historic as well. All right, Pool D, let's take a look there. Finally for you, China, they are still in it. They face Germany to see who gets into the top 8. And then Malta are done. They had an amazing run, but miss out in the end. Italy are through. Andrea Mengucci, yet again, the 4th top 8 in a row.
Back to back to back to back.
Absurd.
Ugh.
Just what a monster that man is. So great stuff there. Those are the pools. So we now know that we are 4 matches away from finalizing our top 8. We are going to do that after a very short break. When we come back, it will be time for the final round of pool play from the World Magic Cup.